Welcome into 4 Down Territory. I am Kyle Madson, the managing editor of NinersWire.com, part of the USA Today Sports Media Group. As always, I am joined by the great Doug Farrar, managing editor of Touchdown Wire. Doug, we're at the halfway point. We made it.
Oh my gosh. What's up, y'all? Yeah, we are.
It feels like, dude, every year this happens, right? Every year it takes forever for the season to get here. The draft is a slog, OTAs, training camp, preseason. Just takes forever.
And it's just,
yeah, man. And then all of a sudden it's week 9. But hey,
yeah,
love getting to do this every week. So let's dive in.
Fascinating week 9, nonetheless.
Yeah, extremely interesting. It definitely the highlight was the 4 big games, one in each time slot, right? The 6:30 game, and then there was the morning game for us on the West Coast, the 10 a.m. kick. And then there was a 1 p.m. game that was really good with Eagles Cowboys. In the 10 a.m. slot, it was that Ravens Seahawks game. And then we had the Sunday night game. Marquee matchups, but it was actually the Texans Bucks game that kind of stole the show. And that's where we'll start. On the same day that Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud, number 2 overall pick, set an NFL rookie record for passing yards with 470. He also tied the rookie record with 5 touchdown passes against the Bucks in that 39-37 last-second win. At the same time that was going on, Panthers quarterback Bryce Young was throwing 3 picks, including a pair of pick sixes. Jesus, easy for me to say, to Colts cornerback Kenny Moore in a 27-13 loss. Now, we don't want to make, massive sweeping judgments too early about young quarterbacks, but is it too early to say that the Panthers made a mistake in trading up to the top pick in the 2023 draft and selecting Young instead of Stroud?
Yeah, I forgot to put his name in here, so now he's just known as Carolina Panthers quarterback, and I don't know. Good player, but I'm not sure. I can only go with my own evaluation, and I don't want to say scouted because I'm not a scout, but I evaluated both of those quarterbacks in depth pre-draft. It was my opinion then. It is my opinion now. It will likely be my opinion in 5 years. Stroud is simply the better quarterback. Once you got past the cognitive test garbage, can we please put that to sleep forever? And the ridiculous idea that he couldn't throw on the move until the Georgia game, has a whole bunch of examples of it. Sorry. You were left with what was on the tape that you cared to pay attention to. And Stroud was better with ball placement. He had a higher floor with a potentially high ceiling. He was much better outside the pocket than he was given credit for. Stats and tape tell the story. Mm-hmm. And given his complicated childhood, and he mentioned this after the game, his father is serving a 38 years to life sentence. Sentenced in 2016 after pleading guilty to charges of carjacking, kidnapping, and robbery in a drug-related incident. So C.J. Stroud didn't get the performance coaches and the amazing academies and the yellow brick road that a lot of these young guys get. I'm not minimizing anyone who gets to the NFL and balls out, but he didn't have that. He had to sort of bootstrap his way up, and that doesn't show up on tape, but it matters a lot. As for Young, the issue for me right now is that he's making the same kind of mistakes in games in what's become 3 multi-interception games in his young career. Mm-hmm. He had 2 picks in his debut against the Falcons. He had 2 against the Lions in week 5. The 2 pick sixes to Moore were each against quick release routes by the running back, and neither throw felt like it was timed right. And when you're missing the simple stuff like that, screens and swings, and making the same kind of errors, more than once in a game and through multiple weeks, I don't know. I'm not trying to kill Bryce Young here. I'm hyper-focused on the negative plays in the context of this discussion. Mm-hmm. And Young has made some great plays, but right now the Panthers have to be at least wondering a bit. And Stroud really doesn't have a lot of negative plays to talk about. Right. He's taking his college game to the NFL and expanding it. The last time I saw a guy do this out of college was Andrew Luck, where Bruce Arians threw the entire 700-page playbook right at his head, and Luck went, "Oh, okay, let's go."
Yeah.
And it was just like, okay, this is that amazing what he's doing. So based on my pre-draft evaluation, I thought Stroud was better. He was 1, Young was 2, but it wasn't like 1A. And that's not to slight Young. It's just that Stroud's better. So that's where I am with it.
Yeah, the Panthers messed up for sure. But for me, this comes down to, Stroud is a better player, but I don't think the gap is as wide as it's been in the NFL. And I put a lot of that on Carolina. They traded up to draft a quarterback who is 5'6", 125 pounds, or whatever Bryce Young is. And then
that might be a slight negative exaggeration.
Right. But he's undersized for the position. and they put him behind a bad offensive line. Adam Thielen is his best receiver. They
Because
don't
they
have
traded DJ Moore to the Bears to get,
right.
Oops.
And I don't buy the team building strategy of just pick a quarterback and then fill in the rest around him. I'm out on that idea. I think you have to have some kind of foundation here. And the Panthers don't. I think they do on the defensive side, but offensively, they were not ready to drop in a quarterback like Bryce Young, who's very good. He's very talented, but I think there are some physical limitations to his game that are going to require a good offensive line and receivers that are explosive and that he has chemistry with. And so he can create out of structure, which he was really good at Alabama. And I don't think the Panthers have given him the tools to do that. So while I think Stroud is a better player, and I think Stroud would be having more success with Carolina than Bryce Young is, I don't think the gap is this wide, where Stroud looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now, and Young looks like one of the worst. I don't think there's that big of a chasm between those two, and for that I put it on the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, trading DJ Moore, who when he's allowed to is a really explosive player.
Right.
They took Mingo in the second round out of Mississippi, and some people were higher on him than I was, but he's a good receiver.
He's fine.
And if they had gotten a Rashee Rice, and the running back situation was more stable, and Ike Ekwonu wasn't having a horrible season. I mean, he's really, really fallen off a cliff in his second year. There were a lot of bad breaks with the Panthers offense. I think I go back to, and I'm going to write about this week because I've been waiting. I figured maybe the first month he's just kind of loopy with NFL speed. But the fact that Young, and there are multiple examples of this, he keeps making the same mistakes. And that's not what you want. Making mistakes is okay.
Right.
Making the same mistakes over and over, especially from such a highly disciplined program as Alabama.
Yeah.
You do this with Nick Saban, man, he's going to burn your head off. So, yeah.
Just mistakes he didn't make in college, too.
Well, he also had a much better structure. And the thing is, I mean, Laramie, for the Texans, Laramie Tunsil's been in and out. He's got some good receivers. Tank Dell can be a force. Damian Pierce has been in and out. So it's not like Houston's situation has been so much better, and Stroud could just zing it around, because Alabama, Ohio State, they're both thrown to like multiple first round picks, and they had 18-wheel semis blocking for them. You get in the NFL and everyone has a plan until they get hit, but in this case I think I just think Stroud has availed himself or acquitted himself better in the NFL with he's got more, but not a lot more.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because we all thought the Texans were a hard rebuild too before the season started. And one reason they're not. They're playoff viable.
Shout out to D'Amico Ryans, man.
Right?
My guy can coach some football.
You knew that more than most.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to second down, where the Baltimore Ravens, holy smokes. So they came into Sunday, number one in offensive and defensive DVOA. I'm not a MIT analytics guy, but that seems good.
DVOA is a former Football Outsiders, now FTN metric, which is basically efficiency, which is opponent adjusted, which means this is why the Dolphins aren't very good with it, because when you just beat up on the bad teams, you lose to the good teams, it's a problem.
Yep.
So it's basically efficiency adjusted for opponent per play and all that.
So being number one in both of these things is a great thing to be.
Yes, and you don't need a degree in calculus to get that.
No. They celebrated their number one offensive and defensive DVOA rankings by taking it to a very good Seahawks team that entered the game 5-2. They left it 5-3 after a 37-3 beatdown in Baltimore. So Baltimore is the third best team in overall DVOA, which goes back to 1981. So we're talking 4 decades here of football. There are still a lot of quality teams in the league, but is there any reason not to crown John Harbaugh's squad as the NFL's best right now? And does any other team have a case, Doug?
Yeah, as I wrote yesterday, they've, very few teams have been this good since Paul Di'Anno was Iron Maiden's lead singer, Up the Irons. I think the Ravens are the best team in football, and here's why. Nobody right now can beat you in more different ways, and there are no real holes anywhere. On offense, they remind me of last year's Eagles, because they perfectly tie their pass game and their run game together with the QB run game. And that's something the Eagles aren't doing as much anymore with Jalen Hurts. The Ravens ran for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns on 41 carries against Seattle. This is one of the worst losses of the Pete Carroll era I can remember. And undrafted rookie Keaton Mitchell, who I loved at East Carolina, he led all backs in that class with I think 31 runs of 15 or more yards and 75 forced missed tackles. So yeah, small guy, but runs big. He ran for 138 yards and a touchdown on just 9 carries against Seattle's defense, which was really good against the run this year until
Very
that.
good.
They can just as easily beat with Lamar Jackson in the passing game now with new OC Todd Monken. And as we'll get to later, sometimes you really need to get a new guy calling concepts on that side of the ball. On defense, they're even more ridiculous. They lead the league in sacks with 35, and they only blitz 22.8% of the time, which is middle of the pack. Moreover, they don't have an alpha dog pass rusher, just a bunch of guys perfectly attuned to their skill sets by defensive coordinator Mike McDonald, who will be a coach. He'll be a head coach next year. Yeah. Don't get too comfy with McDonald as your DC Ravens because he's gone. Safety Geno Stone leads the NFL with 6 interceptions, which would have tied for the league lead in the entire 2022 regular season. This isn't recency bias either. As you mentioned, they demolished the Lions 38-6 in week 7. They exposed what looked like a historically great Cleveland Browns defense in week 4. It is the Ravens' world right now, and everyone else is just paying rent.
They're so good. They're so freaking good. So I'm going to, just for the sake of argument here, I'm going to throw a couple others out. Go. So I think Philly and Kansas City still have to be in the mix. Mm-hmm. Philly is still loaded. And it's very clear early on in the season that they were working out some kinks with new coordinators on both sides of the ball.
Yes.
And I think you're starting to see Philly kind of round into form. And if Jalen Hurts can get going on the ground a little bit more effectively than he's been this season and starts to look more like Jalen Hurts that we saw last year, I think this Philly team is just really hard to beat. Because
that really is the mortar in their offense. And I was talking to people who would know better than I would, and they're all like, yeah, they seem to not want to get him hurt, so they're preventing him from doing as much of it.
Yeah. So, but I think in a one game sample, you talk about Baltimore not having many ways that they can be beat. I think Philly's kind of in that same class. So I'm going to put them in the conversation. Kansas City's still there for me as well, because I've said this on this program and other shows I've been on. The fact that you're giving Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes a top 5 defense is unfair, because at some point they're going to figure it out. Like at some point that offense is going to start to roll a little bit where they're scoring, 28 plus a game. On top of a top 5 defense, that makes Kansas City for me really, really hard to beat, especially if the AFC goes through Arrowhead. So Kansas City's still there. And then, man, after what Cincinnati did to Buffalo on Sunday night, Joe Burrow's back. Lou Anarumo has that defense playing as well as it's played. Cincinnati, over the next 4 or 5 weeks, might just mess around and find themselves in the best team in the league conversation. They look really, really good with Joe Burrow back and healthy after the bye. So they're in the mix for me, but I think if I'm doing power rankings right now, I think you have to put Baltimore at 1, just because of how thoroughly they've dismantled teams like Detroit and Seattle. Let's jump over to third down, where you mentioned this earlier, maybe a coach that maybe needs to go. So now that the Raiders have mercifully ended the Josh McDaniels era, probably a few weeks too late, and they also got rid of general manager Dave Ziegler, is there another coach or coordinator that needs to go to save the team that currently employs him?
Yeah, Kyle, I know you haven't talked about that at all in the last couple of weeks on radio or anything.
No.
No, not at all. I will go, Kyle, with Bills offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey. It could be said at this point that the decision by the New York Giants to hire former Bills OC Brian Daboll has not worked for anybody involved. The Giants are the worst team in football, and the Bills seem to have amputated about half the offense that worked before. There seems to be no calculated concept to get the run game going, and that's especially true in the QB run game. The route concepts aren't really concepts. It's a lot of random stuff that doesn't set anything up for anything else. Daboll was, in Buffalo at least, brilliant at providing Josh Allen with simple coverage beaters when he was on and simplifying things, kind of getting back to basics when he wasn't. Now he has Tommy DeVito and, I think Matt Barkley's on the practice squad or something. It seems to me that Dorsey has a one-size-fits-all playbook. He'll adjust when he absolutely needs to, and then he'll just revert and regress. One example, the Bills finally got their sequential passing game together in Week 8 against the Buccaneers by using speed no huddle. Then they barely used it against the Bengals on Sunday night. Head coach Sean McDermott was asked about it right after the loss to the Bengals, and he said, I don't have a good answer for you right now. I've got to look into that.
No.
I'll leave that where it is.
Concerning.
I'm sure Dorsey
we'll look into it.
Yeah, and Josh Allen said, well, he was asked about the lack of speed. No, well, that's what was called, so that's all I can do.
Okay. Yikes.
I'm sure Dorsey is capable in some instances, in some ways. Maybe he's a sandwich artist. I don't know. But since he was elevated from quarterbacks coach to OC in 2022, the differences are clear. They're especially stark this season. The Bills are now 5-4, fighting for postseason relevance, and I don't see an easy way out with the current structure.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't trust the Bills as far as I can throw them, which is not super far. So
no, they're a large franchise with a huge building. You couldn't throw them at all.
Dude, you've not seen me lift, bro. You've not seen me lift.
I'm not disparaging your strength. I'm trying to give you an out. That's all.
All right, so I think Matt Nagy is a good one because I think disassociating Matt Nagy with all things involving a football team is probably the right move. But
yeah, well, you watch Nagy in Kansas City and you see what Eric Bieniemy's doing with a bad offensive line in Washington. You're like,
yeah, dude, Sam Howell.
Maybe he has something to do with that.
Sam Howell just getting pummeled every week is it's a marvel to watch that he gets back up and continues playing a pretty good football. No, but I'm not totally here yet, but I think Steve Wilkes has got one more game with the 49ers. And
really?
Yeah.
One more game.
Yeah,
wow.
and I mean, at least he should. I don't know that. So part of the reason is they hired Wilkes is because they didn't believe they had a good enough internal candidate. And unless somebody has shown that they can be that over the last 8-9 weeks, then that's probably not going to change. But what the Niners are doing right now defensively just isn't really working. And I don't know if it's Isaiah Oliver being in the slot or it's what they're doing in coverage with when they're running zone or man, or if it's just a matter of a lack of production from the defensive end spot opposite Nick Bosa that's not allowing them to get to quarterbacks as quickly as they need to. I don't know. But they traded for Chase Young, who now has the most pressures and sacks on the team. I looked this up. Nick Bosa has 44 pressures. The defensive end opposite Nick Bosa, all of them combined who have played there, have 41. So that could be a problem that maybe Chase Young solves. But here's what I'm getting to with Steve Wilkes. If Chase Young doesn't solve that problem and they're still not getting to the quarterback and their coverage is still getting torched by Trevor Lawrence coming up in week 10, then I don't know what other solution there is to their defensive problem because it's not talent. This is largely the same group last year that was the number one defense in the league in basically every category. So at that point, you got to look at what's new, and what's new is Steve Wilkes. So that's, but again, I don't know that they have somebody necessarily capable of replacing him. So they might just be kind of stuck and searching for answers for the rest of the year. But, man, if they go out and get torched by Jacksonville in Jacksonville in week 10, it's going to get really, really loud in the Bay Area for Steve Wilkes to lose his job. And
it's interesting because they're not blitzing a lot.
Yeah.
They're not.
But they can't. When they do, they get smoked. So the cover 0 at the end of the first half against Minnesota might have scared Steve Wilkes out of blitzing ever again.
Well, and to his credit, Kyle said bad, and he came out and said, "Yeah, I screwed up." So
it's tough
that much. But
all right,
with all that talent, man. What about Chris Kosuric, their defensive line coach? Is he ready for that? Because I know he's so well respected in the NFL for what he does.
Yeah, I would assume so, but I don't know if he wants that responsibility. I think he just wants to kind of go scream at his defensive linemen. Yeah. I don't know if he wants to worry about everything else.
Yeah.
But honestly, Fred Warner's smart enough. Couldn't Fred Warner just coordinate the defense? Just let him figure it out on the fly? I don't know. Let's get to worst of the week, Doug. What was your worst of the week?
Okay. Guess what?
More refs. Let's go.
Yes. The intentional grounding penalty is Josh Allen at the end of the first half of the Bills-Bengals game. Allen was flagged for intentional grounding after he threw a pass to Gabe Davis after Davis cut back to the quarterback against aggressive man coverage from cornerback Chidobe Awuzie. That is a standard option route, Kyle, against that kind of coverage. You come back out of man and get open quickly. It was clear that Allen thought that Davis was expecting Davis to go through Awuzie on a vertical because he threw the ball 10 yards over Davis' head. He probably thought the play was a fade. Referee Alex Kemp called grounding, and this prompted an interesting discussion between NBC commentator Chris Collinsworth, a former NFL receiver, and NBC rules analyst Terry McCauley, a former Super Bowl referee. I like Terry. I've talked to him before.
That's spicy.
I think he does a good job, but his insistence that Kemp was in the right because the route doesn't matter, it's where the ball lands, seems disingenuous or just wrong. Another factor here is that the intentional grounding rule is intended to punish quarterbacks who throw the ball away wildly to avoid pressure.
Right.
Allen was under no such pressure on that play. Kemp had a similarly dodgy grounding call against Geno Smith of the Seahawks in week 2. Smith threw the front side fade to Tyler Lockett, but Lockett had cut the route short, probably because Jerry Jacobs had outside leverage, and Kemp didn't understand what happened. Smith was also not under pressure when he made that throw. Totally clean pocket, like a nice little arc. Smith argued with Kemp while Kemp's mic was live that Lockett ran the wrong route. That's what he said, and that's where we get the "I'm talking to America" meme.
Incredible.
Not your job, man. Not your job. You're not to talk to America, no matter what Ed Hockley says. Your job is not to recite the Gettysburg Address during the game. Your job is to understand what's going on out there. I would really like you officials to use common sense on plays like this, but we would say that all season long. And I would like also to know, and maybe I'll reach out to Terry about this, do officials, are they trained? Because they have to know some football. They come up from high school, they go to college, then they're in the NFL, however it works. They're not picking guys, cart jockeys in a grocery store going to, the NFL. But do they go through these scenarios like, well, okay, it may look like intentional grounding, but here's kind of a sign that it isn't.
Right.
Because on both of those plays, and people were screaming about it on social media, like it was pretty clear that it was an option route gone wrong. It was pretty clear that it was a miscommunication. And for Alex Kemp to just, blindly with the rule book, the way he saw it, even though that's not how the rule is written, to just throw the flag and go, well, that's what it is. Not good.
This is
not good at all.
This isn't.
And I'm just getting sick of it. Every week, it's just one more stupid thing.
This isn't the first time this has happened either. This was the 49ers and Rams in week 2 had the same type of call. Tutu Atwell broke off his route early, and Stafford thought he was going deep, so Stafford airs it out, and Atwell stops, and Stafford gets hit with a grounding penalty. There just has to be some discretion, but I think this comes down to the NFL's rule book being way too big. There are so many things for these guys to legislate that when they see something like that, there's no time to go, oh, well, that was obviously a mix-up on the route. No flag for intentional grounding. It's that went way over there. There was no receiver, grounding, moving on. It's hard, man, but I'm with you. There needs to be some kind of oversight in games where an official can say, hey, that was not great. That was not within the spirit of the rule.
Yeah.
My worst of the week was the NFC West.
Oh, boy.
I crunched some numbers.
Uh-oh.
The NFC West, the 49ers were on a bye, so the 49ers didn't lose this week. But
that was good.
The Cardinals, the Rams, and the Seahawks lost by a combined score of 84-6.
Is that bad?
It's pretty bad. They gained a total between those three teams of 396 yards. They went 2.6 yards per play as a collective. That is abominable. And you get it. Like, you get it a little bit with Arizona, right? It's Arizona. It's Clayton Tune making his debut against the Browns on the road. They had no chance.
After the Cardinals traded Josh Dobbs to the Vikings, and Josh Dobbs had like the most incredible game any quarterback's ever had.
Bro, there needs to be a book written about that game.
Oh my God.
Unbelievable.
This morning. I got a sad start on it.
Is Josh Dobbs just a top 10 quarterback in the league right now?
No.
Does he could just throw him on a team and he's going to go get you a dub? No.
Well, he's done that like 4 different times in the last year, which is one reason it worked.
I know, he's incredible.
Yeah,
he's incredible. So, the NFC West,
Yeah.
You can forgive the Cardinals for getting shut out. And do you know how many yards the Cardinals had just offhand?
I'm going to say 73.
Ooh, you gave them too much credit. 58.
Oh, darn it.
On 48 plays.
And that was against the Browns.
Yeah, it was against the Browns. But again, like I said, it's Clayton Tune in his NFL debut.
That's, you don't expect a lot more.
Forgive him. But man, the Rams and Seahawks. The Rams were in Green Bay. The Seahawks in Baltimore. That's a tough showing from the NFC West. I know the Rams started Brett Rippon, and so you understand that. But just a bad week in the NFC West all around. So they're my worst because it is really hard to represent a division worse than the NFC West got represented this weekend.
Yeah, I think the only thing that was really surprising was the Seahawks getting boat raced to that degree. Because wow,
yeah, that was a
shocker. And again,
that
full marks to the Ravens. I'm watching their defensive tape this afternoon, and I'm just like, oh,
yeah,
really? Wow, how do you do that and get away with it?
Apparently, people are calling for Geno Smith to be benched for Drew Lock. Yep. That's a thing that's happening.
Yep.
I don't want to know what would have happened to Drew Lock in that game. It would have been way worse. So, man,
it would feel like what 37 to -8. I mean, I don't know how much worse you can get.
Yeah,
he's had a couple of interesting weeks, but realistically, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, me neither.
At least not yet.
That's going to do it for this week's 4 Down Territory. We're at the halfway point, Doug. We made it. Thank you, everybody, for watching this week and in past weeks and in future weeks. We appreciate it greatly. For Doug Farrar and Kyle Madson.
We'll see y'all.